If you consult our director, you will have the information you need to reach the Hispanic Resource Center, because she is coordinating all of the efforts to find out where you can donate, what you can donate, whether it's to Pinner Furniture Share House or other kinds of things. I think there is a fund that's being created for mattresses, for example. Mattresses really can't be donated, old mattresses anyway, and they are creating a fund, I think, to purchase new mattresses. Yes?
Really, just to add to yours, the CAP Center is also coordinating.
Thank you. I'm sorry. My mistake. Yes. The CAP Center also. But mattresses I know are needed. Beds, bureaus, those are the main things that are needed. Many of us already depleted our excess furniture with the last catastrophe. But whatever you have, if you're redecorating and have bureaus, beds, sofas, those kinds of things, the Furniture Share House would be happy to take those things. Anyway, please do what you can. Donate either funds or objects to help these people out. Once again, we have people in our midst that are in great need. Okay, thank you. Today, I also want to thank everyone for coming. Oh, it is. Jeremy, you're here. Why don't you give more information on the flood victims? Here.
I'm sorry to miss the intro. I don't know how much Elaine has
Not much.
We had a meeting of all the different agencies, the CAF agency, social worker from the school, 211, the village of Mamaroneck, and probably the summit. I'm probably missing someone. And that was the middle of last week. That was in the middle of last week. I think what was striking was how little we really knew about the scope of the flooding that happened with Irene. So we're estimating that about 200 houses took serious water, and a lot of that was basement damage. An unspecified number of those basements were occupied. Typically occupied basements are the poorest of the poor who had to throw on everything. We established that 25 families had been displaced. We wrestled with the possibility that maybe 5 of those families still didn't have any accommodation. As of when we met, which was Thursday or Friday, I had one building out of gas. Keith Yiser was out of gas. The CAP Center was out of gas. So we estimated that 5 to 10 buildings still did not have gas hooked on. Keith tells me that he expects to get gas today. We got gas on Saturday. So that's about 14 to 15 days of being without gas. So Washingtonville Housing Alliance took about $30,000 to $40,000 worth of damage. So FEMA has established a crisis center in White Plains. I think what was striking was how everybody escaped. Put up your hands who escaped Irene. It went by. It didn't hurt us, right? So where it hit, people were left completely on their own and sorted out by themselves.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I want to thank everyone for coming. As is our custom, we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. Elaine Chapman, President of the local summit. You want to start? Sorry.
My name is Manas Kaipar. I'm a resident in Larchmont for 42 years. I'm retired.
Great.
Heidi Sickles, Summit Board Member.
Sabrina Fiddleman, Summit.
Eric Lewis, LMC-TV. No, I'm Keith.
Catherine Sullivan, member of Methodist Church in Hi, I'm Nancy Sellingson. I'm a councilwoman in the town of Mamaroneck, and I'm running for supervisor. You have to know that because I don't have an opponent. So I don't like to say the obvious. Abby Katz, I'm a candidate for the Mamaroneck Town Council. You already had the Summit and Cancer Support. Janet O'Fine with Summit and Radar. Nancy Pearson from the school board. Lisa Center from Summit.
Ernie Odierno, Town Councilman.
I'm Paige Rance. I'm with the Sound and Sound Report newspaper.
Teddy Becker, the Summit, and I phone on the Sound.
Jeffrey Wiener, Summit and
Home on the Sound, and a few other things.
Lynn Reichgott, president of At Home on the Sound. We are looking for people to do some driving. If you're able, please see me afterwards. And I'm also Summit and on the Board of CAP.
John Bradley, At Home on the Sound. Bob Ivy, Summit, and At Home on the Sound.
Giselle Merrick, I'm the director of the Mamaroneck Cap Center.
Lynette C., the Mamaroneck School Board.
Kay Francis Richards, Mamaroneck Law on Human Rights Committee, and the Summit.
Mary Barrett, the Summit, Women's Club, Interfaith, and and please sign as these things are passing around, and get your money in the yellow envelope. Thank you.
Luis, you came in and running. Introduce yourself.
Hi, Luis Chinos, I'm a community activist, social worker.
George Latimer, New York State Assemblyman. If you haven't seen the documentary Gasland on hydrofracking, tonight, 6:45, Bribery Reading Room. You're welcome to attend.
Harmon McAllister, Larchmont Mamaroneck.
Kathy McCarthy, food pantry, Larchmont beautification.
Lily and Carol, first time.
Great.
Susan Amlin, Kendall. Amy, you super real Summit At Home on the Sound. Long time name. Where was it going? Judy Silverstein, mostly retired.
Ann McAndrews, yeah, same thing.
Harold Wolfson, the Summit.
Lisa Tidball, Rock YMCA.
Iris Street, whole community there.
Selwood Reed, among others, physicians for social responsibility, and I'm the husband of Irish.
Brian Donnelly, I'm with the Daily Mamaroneck.
Good morning, TPI at the Summit.
Jeremy?
Jeremy Yankman, Washingtonville Housing Alliance.
Jackie Tremaine, psychologist and former columnist for the Gazette.
Thank you. I'm going to now turn the program over to Harold Wolfson. I want to thank once again everyone for coming for our opening session of this season's programs for the local summit.
Again, good morning. Thank you all for coming. I see Richard Allen of the local Methodist Church is a little late. He's our secretary. Most of what we know that is happening in the changing world, we perceive through the press. And we're very fortunate today to have 4 different representatives of the press, different types of publications. We have a national publication, international publication, New York Times, represented here. We have a huge regional publication, the Journal News, which covers Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland counties. We have an internet publication, which covers local sound area news, and we have a print local newspaper that covers local news. So there's quite a spread of perspective present here today. I'm going to ask our speakers to stand when they talk so that our LMC-TV camera can see them and they can be recorded properly. So we're going to go in alphabetical order. And that's pretty good because there'll be a large paper, smaller paper, and a larger paper. Joe Berger of the New York Times is well known to many local people. He's a resident of our area. He's been with the Times since 1984, is that right? And we know him primarily through his colorful news and news feature writing. He also has written 3 books, And I understand there's one in gestation. Is that true? The book that I remember best is Growing Up American After the Holocaust.
Displaced persons.
A displaced person. So, Joe has filled many seats at the New York Times, columnist, reporter, editor. And so, Joe, you are our first suspect.
Oops. Thank you very much. I want to thank Harold for inviting me, and I also want to thank this group, which, you know, just I'm very moved that someone is keeping tabs on people hurt by the by Hurricane Irene. You know, it's important to have this kind of organization in a community like this, so it's a pleasure to be speaking here. Harold sent me a few questions that are supposed to trigger some thoughts on my part. The first one was, what was the impact of the recession on the New York Times? It was harsh, quite harsh. Advertising plummeted, and we are very dependent on advertising for much of our income. So we had to cut in 2 different phases 200 newsroom employees. That doesn't count circulation, marketing, you know, all the other departments that you need to put out a newspaper. So a staff of reporters, editors, and photographers and graphics people that was numbered at about 1,300, probably I guess the largest in the country, is now down to 1,100. It was very painful. You know, lots of. Luckily, the Times did it in a very gracious fashion. They offered buyouts to the staff, so anyone could apply for the buyouts. And if you were a senior person, it was often very worthwhile to take a buyout. So, but ultimately, we lost a lot of very good people and colleagues and friends, and it was very painful. And it was painful for readers as well, because we had to decide what we were no longer going to do. And you know, you can argue with a decision, and I will argue with some of the decisions as well. But the fact was, one of the decisions we made was we closed our suburban bureaus. So we had. Well, when I was bureau chief in White Plains, we covered Westchester and much of upstate New York. We had 4 reporters and 2 or 3 stringers. We closed that bureau, not only to save 4 salaries, but also to save the rent. And we closed bureaus in Long Island, in Connecticut, and in New Jersey. And for a time, when you picked up the Times, you would think we only covered New York City. We've slowly, the idea was that if something big happened in the suburbs, we would send a reporter up there. So I'm thinking what major event, you know, for the, let's say, the flooding in the Catskills. We sent a reporter up to the Catskills. But obviously that's not as good as having a person on the ground who actually knows the Catskills, or knows Westchester, or knows Long Island, knows the people to talk to, knows the government officials. So we concede this is a very big loss in terms of our coverage. But we had to make, you know, we had to choose between covering Westchester and covering foreign news, which is very expensive, and we decided that our mission, that more people read us to find out what's happening in the world, where they can't get their news any other way, in some cases. So we decided to cut back on the suburban bureaus. And it's a huge loss, and a lot of us are upset, and I'm upset as a reader. So, but we do have, Peter Applebone was what often happens in newspapers is they make these changes and then slowly everything goes back to the way it was. Well, we're far from that yet, but right now we do have one reporter who's a terrific reporter. He used to be our town's columnist, Peter Applebone. So if you have a really great story, he's the person to talk to, and he floats around. He lives in Chappaqua, but floats around Long Island and Connecticut, as well as New York. And we had a New Jersey reporter who's recently moved back to education, but I'm sure we're going to have another New Jersey reporter. But that's it. We used to have something like 15 to 20 suburban reporters. We've also cut back. We also cut back on our education coverage for a time, cut it in half. But we've slowly moved back to where it was. So that was something we decided our readers really had to have, and we've built it up again. So that was the impact of the recession. So the next question Harold asked me was, how is the web affected our coverage? And the web, it took us a long time to figure out what we needed to do with the web. But I would argue that we have one of the best websites in the country, one of the best news websites. We certainly have the most visited newspaper website in the country. We have we almost never hire any reporters anymore, but we do hire web producers, graphics producers, bloggers, and a lot of Twitterers and things. My Yiddish mama used to say, "Mit was essen man das?" With what do you eat it? I mean, we're encouraged to Twitter, but some of us haven't quite gotten the knack, and I feel there's better ways. Some of us feel there are often better ways to spend our time, but that's the new world. What can I say? In any case, the big light bulb that went off in our heads in the last year was that we started charging for the web. In other words, we were putting out all these services of news, and people were able to read us entirely for free. Basically giving away all this work of 1,100 employees for anyone who had a computer. Well, we've stopped that, and we now charge for the web, and lo and behold, it's working. We've gotten 300,000, I think the last number I heard was 300,000 additional readers who subscribe to the web. And interestingly enough, some people have figured out that actually it costs as much money to order the paper, and you get the web for free if you order the paper. And so we've gotten actually more people subscribing to the newspaper, because it's the same deal. You subscribe to the newspaper and you get the web for free. We did it very carefully, very intelligently, and we had to figure out if you get the web, if you look at the web on an iPad, or if you look at the web on an iPhone, or if you look at the pad on some other device, if you have one account, do you charge for your son, your daughter, your grandmother? All these things took a long time to figure out, but we did, and it's working for us. And I think one of the great things that's changed in our journalism is we do many more things. So if I go out and cover a story, I also have to think, is this something that we may want to send a videographer along? Is this something we may want to do a slideshow for? Do we want to do some graphic Lollapalooza to go along with it? And we do all those things. You see the web and you see wonderful blogs and comments from readers, and we have a lot more communication from readers now. We feel that very quickly because if you do anything wrong, if you make any minor mistake, you will hear about it, and your editor will hear about it, because people are blogging and editing, and so you quickly find out our readers are really on top of us in a way they probably wouldn't have been a long time ago, when you had to actually put a piece of paper in a typewriter and put a stamp on an envelope. And finally, Harold asked me to talk about the impact on Murdoch, on the press. This new hacking scandal where in London, where reporters were hacking into the cell phone accounts and other phone accounts of first important people, and then crime victims, and it was and they were paying off police to give them access and numbers. It's a very, very ugly scandal. But you know, I worked for Murdoch for about 6 months at the New York Post when he took it over. I had worked for Dorothy Schiff's New York Post, and then Murdoch came in and promised that he would just put out good journalism, and he wasn't true. So we immediately had, we had indications of some of the things that we're hearing about now. For example, one of the early stories we had was about Son of Sam. We had a picture of Son of Sam sleeping in a jail cell. Now you wonder, how did we get a picture of Son of Sam sleeping in a jail cell? Did we get a photographer in there, or did we pay a guard to photograph Son of Sam sleeping? And I remember that there were a lot of twists and turns taken with stories, including stories of mine. I'll tell one anecdote, and then because I'm taking up too much time, but I had this great opportunity to go to Egypt because Menachem Begin was returning the visit from Sadat, who had made a visit to Jerusalem. So they sent me to Egypt. And I get to the hotel, and there's what do they call those in those days? Telex from one of the editors. Can I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and go to the pyramids and have my photograph taken on top of a camel? A photographer will meet me and take my picture riding a camel. I said, listen, I'll go up to the pyramids at 6 o'clock in the morning and interview the camel drivers, but I'm not going to get on a camel. I don't do stunts. So I had this back and forth that went on for a couple of hours, as I remember. They finally conceded that I would just have to have my picture taken interviewing a camel driver at 6 o'clock in the morning. And surely enough, they ran the front page headline, the big headline of the day was "Our Man in Cairo." But it showed you what the values, were that I kind of didn't want to, and I started to worry about, whatever reputation I had achieved by then would be destroyed. So I left. So I'm not surprised by what's happened. I don't think it's going to affect the way people think about other newspapers, because they can see that this is a discrete episode involving a discrete organization. We don't do those things. The paper and the Journal News doesn't do those things. And the other blogs here won't do those things. So anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Joe mentioned my name, I think, 8.5 times, and I'd like to mention Heidi Sickles' name twice because she was my partner in getting these gentlemen to come today. Our next speaker is Polly Kreisman, and 4 years ago she founded The Loop, an internet publication of news, opinion. Polly comes up into journalism through the TV electronic media. She was an investigative reporter for CBS and other New York groups. She's a winner of 15 Emmys. She describes herself as a obsessive journalist, one who wants to see everything and report on it. So I give you Polly Kreisman.
When did I say I was an obsessive journalist?
It was in a Google matter.
Probably not written by me, but that's okay. Thank you. I was an investigative reporter on television for many years. It was at WPIX Channel 11, WWOR Channel 9, and WNBC Channel 4 in New York. And previous to that, I covered Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And in about 2003 or 4, after working in television for many years and continuing to do so and having 2 small children, we decided to move to Westchester, as many of us do. My family's actually been here since the 1930s, but I had been in New York City and Washington. And at the time that we moved here in 2003, it was an extremely historic moment in journalism. There was sort of a perfect storm of 3 things happening. The legacy media, such as the New York Times and the television stations that I had worked for, were retrenching in the face of economic pressures. And at the same time, there was a proliferation of web tools that anybody could access. While all of this was happening, the news cycle in this country became 24 hours. So you had this tremendous appetite for news, fewer people to do it, and lots of people who were willing to do it for free who weren't journalists, quote unquote. And what this created was a very interesting problem. Anybody could become a journalist. And the challenge for people like myself was how to become entrepreneurial in this journalistic world, because the traditional employers were eroding, mine eventually did, to find a voice and to find an audience. So what we've tried to do at The Loop is accessed through a URL, theloopny.com. And our mission is to cover Larchmont, Mamaroneck, New Rochelle, and we get a little bit of Scarsdale and Rye as well. And not to try and do what the New York Times does expertly, but to create an audience and a community online where we can moderate conversations, we cover the news, and we have lots of very skilled writers working with us. But in order to really have a voice, I believe, in this day and age, you can't do everything. You can't be everything to everybody. So that's kind of the difference between ourselves and the New York Times. The other trend that I am thinking about quite a bit these days is investigative reporting. I really miss it, and it was something that I enjoyed doing. And it's not easy to do that kind of journalism when you're covering a local community. You know, you don't necessarily want to be investigating your neighbors. And frankly, a lot of the big stories that require investigative reporting are national in scope. You know, George's finances are so clean. I mean, there's, what am I going to do? So another trend that's emerging that I thought you'd be interested in knowing about is this whole area of nonprofit investigative reporting. Because the television stations that I work for no longer have investigative units, and because many of the newspapers, in an effort to save money, have also closed down quote-unquote I-teams and investigative units, there's an emerging movement to create regional investigative journalism centers that are funded by foundations and donors. And I'm involved with one right now that's trying to cover New York City with foundation money and, excuse me, donors. And eventually try and find a way to become sustainable by selling our stories to the television stations that no longer have investigative reporters. I also wanted to recognize Judy Silverstein, who really was a pioneer in this space. When I first came here, when we first came here, when the Loop first launched, she was our competition, and really the only competition online. I mean, I think she discovered this niche long before many other people did. And now we have many other sort of online entities in the area. Sound in Town, which was a newspaper for a long time, right, has created a viable online entity. And the Journal News has a really, I think, robust website. It's really matured in my view, and it has these individual blogs too. So you can go to the Sound Shore blog or the Rockland blogs, etc. So it's been really wonderful to see everybody grow. And if anybody's familiar with Patch, I don't want to speak about them if there's somebody here, but America Online started something called Patch, and they have 300 or 400 sites around the country that all look the same on the outside, and they employ younger journalists, which is a good thing, and some might argue not a good thing, but it's keeping jobs in the industry. And then Main Street Connect, which is sort of the newest one, is also kind of I want to say a cookie cutter site. I didn't mean that in a bad way, but the sites all look very similar. So it'll be interesting to see whether these sort of conglomerations of sites versus the homegrown sites can compete in the same environment. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Our next speaker is Mark Longariello. Am I saying that right?
Close. Longariello.
Longariello.
Yeah.
Mark is sort of a wunderkind. He began reporting as a career 6 years ago, and now he's the managing editor of 5 newspapers.
That's right.
He was previously a staff writer, and I understand a prodigious one. He told someone that as a staff writer, each week, he would write 8 stories in covering 3 municipal governments, 3 boards of education, and then be available for breaking news and news features. So he isn't writing at the moment, but Mark, would you come up and tell us what's happening at Sound in Town and the other publications?
I told Harold it doesn't feel very special if you see my paycheck, so get that out of the way. But I think we're a little bit different than a lot of these national publications, daily publications, in the fact that we've been a free paper and we are a free paper, so our business model is slightly different. Having said that, we do feel the economy like anybody else, which is to say advertisers are very hesitant to open up their wallets and purses these days. But I think that what we're kind of seeing is over the last few years, and I think that what Polly was speaking on with the Loop, the Patch, Main Street Connect has kind of been almost like these cracks opened up in local coverage, which we've stepped to the plate to kind of try to really give that, you know, the buzzword these days, hyper-local coverage, which is very focused. We try to be, you know, everything that we want to run on our front pages is specific to that community. But what we have been seeing is also the internet. I did want to touch on that because that's, in a way, leveled the playing field for people like us, which these daily newspapers, these larger publications, used to, you know, they're coming out every day, we're coming out weekly. So just by their model, of course, they could beat us to any news that's happening on the ground. No matter if we know it first or not, we kind of have to wait until Friday before it gets out to the public. But with the internet, we've kind of been able to cut that off a bit, which, you know, we post things on the internet as soon as we get it. Of course, we have to edit it and things like that, but like anyone else. But and we've also kind of seen that since the daily papers and things have had to make cuts, and they have people multitasking and covering multiple beats, we try to be very specific about it, and we've really focused on trying to be kind of set the tone of local news coverage, what's important to the community, what's important to all of our communities. And in doing so, I think that we kind of have been building a little bit of stock in the community that maybe didn't exist 6-7 years ago when I was getting started in these communities. But also, I think that we're seeing, and this, I'm not speaking on this particularly to my company, Hometown Media Group, but kind of across the board with journalism, there's that question that we were asked, are we getting our news? And I think that part of the issue is that as the economy has been hitting and people are making cuts, we're not just seeing less staff with our papers, we're seeing these things like multimedia kind of actually, they're a benefit, of course, although some of us are going kicking and screaming into it, of course, but I think they're a benefit, but it's also become a situation where I think that a lot of up-and-coming reporters are getting into the industry as people that could do things like shoot video, edit video on Final Cut Pro, record audio and things like that, as opposed to, I would assume, I mean, I was in high school 20 years ago, but that it used to be if you were a good reporter and a good writer, you became a reporter. Now, I think that you could be a great reporter, not have some of these multimedia talents, and maybe not be somebody who gets into journalism anymore. So I think we're seeing that a bit. In our paper, we are multitasking too. I'm just kind of speaking on the broader thing. Paige Rentz, who's our reporter over there, just want to embarrass him.
Paige is a great reporter, by the way.
Yes, I agree. She, but for example, she is also taking care of our web duties and things like that. She's kind of our webmaster on top of everything else. So when you get behind the scenes and you actually see how much that people are doing on a weekly, how many different stories that they're covering, it's just, it's kind of that thing. The more staff that gets taken away, the more each of us has to do to kind of make it work. I wanted to get into that Murdoch poll just a little bit because one of my favorite stories. But I keep telling people when they say, I saw a Gallup poll in October of last year that they said judge the ethics of any profession, very ethical, you know, kind of ethical, not very ethical at all. And I think reporters were 23% is the public's perception of how ethical the position is. And you know, thanks to Mr. Latimer and everybody else, we have politicians and others that are judged just a little bit lower than we are.
Only the category, not the person.
Yes, only the category. Lobbyists. Yeah, right? Lobbyists, other people are perceived. I'm talking strictly perception. But luckily we have car salesmen, things like that, that kind of, you know, put us not at the absolute bottom of the pack. So thanks to politicians and everyone else. But You know, I think it is kind of a thankless task, and I think we all see if we try not to read the messages on the boards and on the blogs and things like that. But I think everybody always feels that there's some kind of scam or some kind of angle as to why people are doing their journalism. But I think it was his name escapes me now, the editor of the Guardian in the UK, who said, well, in regards to the Murdoch scandal, it was a reporter who broke that story too. So as much as it might damage the idea of journalism, of course it's us that are still getting that word out. So hopefully that's been at least a little bit informative. Thank you.
Paige, are you going to give us a fairly positive twist? Joe McDonald of the Journal News carries two titles, one on each shoulder. He's deputy managing editor, and he's also editor in charge of content. And that's a big job. He's held most every job in the newsroom, I'm told. You were a reporter, you were a copy editor, you could spell obviously. You were an assistant Metro editor, and in December you took on the job of deputy managing editor and content editor. I was told by one of Joe's highly placed colleagues that he's made a profound change and improvement in local news coverage at the Journal News, and in particular in instigating a system and a follow-through on investigative reporting. So it's with pleasure I ask Joe to come here.
Thank you. You can imagine the challenge following three other very good speakers who talked about the trends in our business and not sound repetitive. And that gives you a little bit of an idea of the challenge that we face every day in our jobs. There are a lot of different media organizations, formal and informal, that are competing for business and all of your time. And luckily, today, all of you are kind of a captive audience, so you're presumably going to hear me out, and having heard all of us, but day in and day out, there's a lot more out there, a lot more choices out there for all of you. And generally, I would say that's a good thing. It makes us all better. The other thing I was thinking as I was listening to the other speakers, at one point I watched the server walk in carrying about 6 plates up her arm and kind of tried to hurdle the microphone cord and keep all the plates in the air. And it reminded me of my job and I presume what some of my colleagues here face. And I say that because I am here from the Journal News Media Group. And today we publish the Daily and Sunday Journal News, the Sound Shore Express and 8 other weekly community publications, the LoHUD.com website, which Polly mentioned earlier, Rockland Magazine, and a number of niche websites, including the Sound Shore Express community blog, which also was mentioned. So the biggest change, I would say, over the past 10 years that we faced is about 10 years ago we were still primarily a newspaper company, and today we are a media company. And our audience expects us to deliver information, has come to expect us to deliver information to them in many ways other than the print forum. So there have been some enhancements. On the website, for example, we faced the dilemma of previously not being able to get information out so quickly. We would have to wait for our newspaper to go to press, and now we're able to deliver information immediately. So for example, recently, Hurricane Irene, we ran a live chat on our website. We had reporters and photographers working around the clock, including when the worst of the storm hit overnight Sunday morning. We had a reporter in the field, the Sound Shore area, and he was taking photographs using his smartphone and shooting video using his smartphone. There was a car that was submerged, and the rescuers had to pull some people out of the car in Rye. And he made a video of that using his smartphone and immediately uploaded that to our website. So, I mean, you think about just a few years ago, a story like that, we would have had to wait, in some cases, 24 hours to get into print for you, and we were able to deliver this information immediately. But we did that live reporting. It was a 30-hour marathon live chat, and it was reporters, photographers sharing information, and also readers, letting other readers know this road is closed, you can go here to find shelter, the power is out here, what do you know about the conditions on such and such a road? And it was really effective. We had, I think we had about 30,000 people participate in that chat at one time or another during those 30 hours. I mentioned the community publications that have helped us target hyperlocal news. We've also, with the digital space, been able to enhance our conversation with people. So now there are opportunities for people to post comments directly on stories. Think about previously, you wanted to react to something that you read, you would write a letter to the editor. And it might take a few days or a week, and maybe it would get published. Well, now, if you read something in the newspaper or on the website that you want to react to, you can immediately post a comment. Now, that's a good thing in some ways, and then there are some downsides to that, and that is people can post whatever they want, and sometimes they say things that are inflammatory, and our experience has been that people are much more inclined to shoot from the hip when they're anonymous. And so, I mean, I'm just surprised and at times appalled at some of the things that people will say and how they will react to things, especially when there's a tragedy. You know, families are grieving, and it's not civil. It's at times, and so it's something that as an industry we're working on right now to figure out what's the best way to have that conversation take place in the digital space without letting people unfairly take pot shots at other people. I think that the engagement with the community is a good thing. We get a lot of from those story chats and forums. We get a lot of story ideas. When we're working on a story, sometimes we will post what we call a crowdsourcing item and say we're working on a story about such and such. Give us a shout if you've had some experience with this. And so interacting with the community in this way has been a very good thing for us. The other thing I would say, and this was mentioned earlier, is that we have prioritized watchdog journalism. Stories that try to shine a light on public issues. We recently did an investigation of the I-287 construction project. I would note that someone in this room was quoted in that story. But we're really trying to, throughout the week, and especially in our very well-read Sunday paper, trying to emphasize coverage that gets that information, public records, how your tax dollars are being spent, salary information, and so far it's been very well received, and we intend to keep it going, so that's been a priority. I would note, in addition to working at the Journal News, I'm an MBA student at Fordham. Someone mentioned connection to Fordham earlier. I'm just finishing up the program there. And so when I put on my business hat, I have to point out that professional journalism, such as what we've all been discussing here, can be very expensive. to do the kind of investigative work that I was talking about. It's expensive, and the recession has made it difficult to sustain that at times. Most of our revenue under the current business model, I have nothing to do with this, by the way, on the content side. Under our current business model, most of the revenue comes from our advertisers, not from our readers. The advertisers really cover the cost of our journalism, and most of our revenue still comes from our print publications. I read a figure recently that for our parent company, Gannett, $4 of every $5 that come in are from print. So about 1 of every 5 is from digital. Now that's something that we expect to increase, what we get from digital over time. But that's the current state of affairs. So you talk about print being in trouble and the difficult conditions. Well, we still get the bulk of our revenue from print, and I would venture to say that that's true of other organizations as well, although that's changing. So our advertisers have been affected by the recession, and the advertisers cover our costs. So as advertisers have cut back on spending, we've obviously had to cut back as well. The other thing I would note is if you think about what's changed over the past few years, just a few years ago, there was a thriving classified business in print newspapers. If you wanted to sell something, or you had a job to fill, all of that would be done through the classified section of the newspaper. Well, all of that business, I won't say all, but a lot of that business is done elsewhere now in the digital space. You look for a house, you used to flip through the newspaper and look for a house. A lot of people are doing that online now. So that business has changed dramatically, and we've had to react to that. So as the others have indicated that they've had to cut back, so have we. And in doing that, we've had to prioritize, and I mentioned some of the things that we're prioritizing. And at the same time, all of these difficult economic conditions, as I mentioned, we face more competition from professional journalists and people who just enter the digital space, put up a blog, and start covering the news. And I think that's a good thing. I think each of us brings something else to the table and encourages community conversation with what we offer. Now, again, I'm on the content side, so that doesn't speak to the issue of revenue, because we're all sort of competing for the same dollars at this point as well on the revenue side. In terms of the phone hacking scandal, I would just say that I'm not qualified to really pass judgment or offer any opinions about what may or may not have happened, except to say that these sorts of scandals hurt all of us. I think they make it more difficult for all of us to do our jobs, because the public tends to kind of group us all together, even though the vast majority of us would never do any of those things. I would also point out that there are rogues in any business, in any profession, whether you're a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, a politician, whatever. There are good and bad in any profession. I think people sometimes hold us to a standard of perfection. I'll occasionally get calls from people when they see a spelling mistake or a grammar mistake in the paper. And it's embarrassing. I mean, we do endeavor every day to be perfect. But we are humans, and thankfully we are humans doing this work. And we do make mistakes. I would just say that in terms of these kind of ethical scandals that come up, be it plagiarism, be it voicemail hacking, it's up to each participant in the profession. Each of us has our own moral fiber, based on our upbringing, and I would say most of us, based on that, would not engage in these sorts of behaviors. But there are some out there, and all we can do, the rest of us can do, is to try to repair the image of our profession, such as it is. You know, I guess I would also say that occasionally I get calls about people about an invasion of privacy issues, that sometimes we in the media, we at the Journal News and we in the larger sense, will invade people's privacy by going too far. I took a call recently from a mother who was upset that we had published her son's DWI arrest. I will tell you that when we post those DWI arrests on our website, we can tell exactly how many people read each story on the website. It is, every morning we post that list of DWI arrests. It is number 2 or number 3 on our website every morning in terms of the most popular. So for some reason that I can't explain, you're all interested in reading about who's been picked up for DWI. And I think sometimes this privacy issue that comes up is you want to read those things until it happens to you. And so I guess in closing on that phone hacking issue, I would just say we take our ethics very seriously. As an editor, it's my job to challenge my reporters in editing their work, ask them the kind of questions to pick up on the fact that they might have done something wrong, and we do take it very seriously. And if you do, in your dealings with our staff, encounter anything that you think is untoward, I would encourage you to give the editors at the newspaper a call. It's something that we care about. Our reputation and our credibility, we take it very seriously. The last question we were asked to address is changes that we envision coming down the road. I would, just a few random thoughts here. I think that we will see our print publications over time becoming more of a niche. And as I mentioned earlier, right now, advertisers pay for that. I think what you might see is readers, subscribers, people who want to have that print newspaper delivered to them, bearing more of the cost of the journalism that they get. And that speaks to the issue of the Times paywall. The Times has led the way on that, and we're all happy that they have, because we think that that model that they're using is something that we can all benefit from at some point in the future. What has been happening is the print subscribers and the print customers have been paying the cost of the journalism that the online readers have been reading for free. And so we know we have to change that, and we're working on that. The other thing I think you'll see more of is mobile delivery of information. We're already doing text alerts. I find myself driving sometimes, and I'll get a text that, well, you're not supposed to text while drive, but are you allowed to read them? I don't know. No, then I don't do that either. Well, anyway, you're supposed to read your text before you get in the car, but you can sign up for these text alerts about what's happening on roads that you drive and everything, and people find that very useful. I think that you'll see more mobile delivery of information from us. And as we settle into this changing role, digital space, print as a niche, I think you're going to see us specializing more and improving content in certain areas that we know are of high reader interest. And all of us will have to find ways to sort of differentiate ourselves, take advantage of our competitive advantage, and in our case, we've found that to be playing the watchdog role.
What the last Larchmont newspaper was, and I was told, but I'm not sure, that it was on Addison, where the Flower Bar is. If anybody knows if that's true.
Lewis.
Yes. Interesting what we heard. A few months ago, I had my book published titled Another's Mind, and it dealt with what it was for millions of us to be defined as others in this, in the United States. And I want to also say that there's an other newspaper that's very important called the Westchester Hispano by Maria Matos. And a lot of our children take Spanish in the classrooms. I highly recommend this. And Gisela, the CAP director, and myself write a political column in it every time it comes out. Some of the articles are in English, but we contribute a lot to the economy of this county and Mamaroneck and Larchmont. Our economic influence is huge and getting bigger. And I think I'd like you all to consider picking it up. It's a free publication. Our views, Gisela and I are highly educated in this country, and we would appreciate it if others like this, because Maria does a phenomenal job on this. And when it comes to politicians, they get in it, but you know, outside of elections, there's a lot of other news that we should be validating.
Viva Marie Amado.
Right, okay? Thanks.
Sir.
Okay, we're good then. Hi, Jim Colon with Habitat. How is Facebook, during the floods, we posted on Habitat of Westchester Facebook page, I needed volunteers at a week that was very, very low historically for us, and I got thank God, a good response. How is Facebook changing the face of journalism? And I'm looking at Brian here, who's probably one of the youngest people here next to me. How is Facebook changing the face of media today?
Who would you like to address that
Anyone who wants to
question
address it, Joe's leaving soon, and I want to see that camel picture of him before.
No, I never rode the camel.
I know it. We're going to spread a rumor. You
The stories remember that I did, but I didn't.
Anybody wants to go?
For me, Facebook has proven very useful as for other reporters, because when you need to get a hold of somebody, you Google their name, and you often find they have a Facebook page. And so you immediately find out their age, the town they live in. So if you're doing a story about a crime victim or someone, a disaster, a name that had been unknown to you before, and you want to find out some basic information, so many people have Facebook pages that you can find out quite a bit about them right away.
And do all the papers have Facebook?
How do you get around the privacy selections that people have on their Facebook page?
You're going beyond my... one of the things that needs to be said is that, looking around this audience, I'm guessing most of you are newspaper readers. But if I was addressing, the graduates of Mamaroneck High School right now, probably almost none of them would be newspaper readers. And that is what is determining the future of our business. Because while we're, trying to keep putting out a newspaper for people to read, a hard product, the fact is, younger people are finding us on electronic devices of various sorts, which keep changing, and we have to keep adapting to that. And and in a way, it's not going to be that bad, because, after all, a lot of expenses like cutting down trees and trucking these newspapers are going to be obsolete, and so that's going to be a good thing. But these things are going to take a while to sort out.
Joe, thank you.
I just wanted to add something really quick to that. You can like us, livehead.com, on Facebook, and then that gives you an opportunity to add comments and post links on our website. And a lot of people are doing that. There was one on Saturday night. When someone posts to our Facebook page, I get an email that comes up on my BlackBerry, and I got one on Saturday night that made reference to the disappearance of 22 horses. And I immediately forwarded it to the editor who was on duty and said, "What is this, 22 horses missing? That's kind of a big deal." And he sent back a note that said, "You scared me." It was in Schoharie County, upstate. But there are opportunities for readers to post story ideas on the Facebook page. It's another way that we can interact. We get a lot of story ideas. It's another opportunity for people to comment on what we do, both positive and negative. One of the good things about Facebook is people typically are using their real names on Facebook, not like the anonymous comments that we see elsewhere.
Elaine.
I'd like to, I don't know who would like to, maybe all of you would like to respond to this, and that's the issue of civil discourse that you brought up with anonymous, others have brought up about vetting. With all of this opportunity for, maybe I should.
Yeah, could you repeat?
I'm sorry. I'm concerned about the issue of civil discourse on the web, particularly on the websites that have news, obviously, and news that can be commented on. How one achieves civil discourse in this. You had talked about how anonymously identified pieces have a greater tendency to be inflammatory or whatever, and brutal sometimes. How does one on the web police this? How does one make sure that there is a level of civil discourse that results from this opportunity to give feedback?
May I?
I know on the loop we moderate all of our comments. If somebody comments on our site, I get an email and I can read it, and we can approve it or not approve it. And excuse me, our mantra is no personal attacks. True or untrue, nobody is going to be vilified on our site by a third party. In the New York Times today, there's a wonderful story about a small town in Missouri, you all should read this, where the comments that have been left on a local Topics, T-O-P-I-X board, Topics is sort of the blog platform for small town America, have so vilified certain people that they're leaving town. Please read this story. So it's really important as journalists that we curate all of these comments.
Well, I was just going to mention that I noticed that on the front page of the Times this morning as well. It's an article about exactly this thing. It's happening in mostly in small towns in middle America, but only so long before it hits everywhere.
Oh, it is everywhere. It is everywhere.
And the issue is really about
responsibility
of the providers to screen and to check the facts as well.
Right, I agree. Earlier when I was talking about how anybody can be a journalist now, I think one of the things that we all have to embrace is this responsibility that the traditional newspapers had. We have to be responsible.
Judy Silverstein.
Can you talk about the role of the aggregators? Those of us who do read online, what happens is, like, I subscribe to Google Alerts, or I look at Google News, and what's happened in the local papers is also happening on Google. It used to be you had your Larchmont paper and you had Larchmont News, and all of a sudden the Mamaroneck News would creep in, and then the county news, and then you're reading about the Catskills. That's happened on Google. You used to be able to subscribe to Larchmont. Now they give you alerts about what's happening in Long Island, and they don't give you what's happening in Larchmont. You can't force it to tell you. And what happens if I'll read an article and I'll forget which website I've read it from. So I've read an article about, you know, the Mamaroneck Village Board, but I don't remember, was it a Sound in Town article or a Journal News article or a Loop article or whatever. But as a news consumer, sometimes I don't care. But if I get no news because I don't get the alert from Google, or I haven't read that, there's so many different possibilities where I could get that news. How do you get Google and the other aggregators to actually pick up your stories? Or are you putting them yourself behind a wall so they can't pick up the story?
Who would like to comment on that?
I'll take a pass. One of the things that we're learning about in our business is something called SEO, search engine optimization. And there are, I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, it was like 2 days of training, but there are keywords that you can use on your page on your pages on your website and also in your headlines so that you get prioritized on search engines. And so, for example, if you, what you would do is you use this technique so that when someone searches for Hurricane Irene Westchester, we want the Journal News to be the first result that they get. And so I think as the industry learns more about this SEO, that might help get the results that you want in the alerts, because I think it's really based on that.
Right, but you're a very big organization. The Gannett should come up before a local calendar item on the list, and it's not. Polly's done a great job, except that they're picking up their calendar items, not your news items. So how can you all band together and get like a monster like Google to actually give the consumers and your publications, you know, for 3 weeks in a row, somebody's wedding is superseding news of Irene, and that's ridiculous. Yeah, right. And, you know, so you...
It's a great question.
We're learning. We're really, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that literally it's changing by the day. And just when we think we've mastered this thing I was telling you about, the reporter takes a video and uploads it directly into the chat, well then like 2 days later there's some new way that we're going to do that. So the pace of change has just increased so dramatically. And to me, what's most important, I mean, you can get really caught up in some of these technological things, and what's most important to me is that in the end it's about the content. And we cannot let our standards go in the interest of immediacy or technology. I mean, technology is a way to help us get information to you, but it shouldn't decrease the quality of what we do.
Yes, Eric.
Yeah, hi, I'm Eric Lewis.
Ernie, you're next.
From LMC-TV. With the advent of these new hyper-local websites for news, clearly there's a perception that people are very interested, both in terms of market and in terms of news, with localities, with Mamaroneck, small towns, whatnot. The question I have is, what are the main, why? Two, what are the main stories that have emerged that people feel that should be reported upon from this hyperlocal focus? And three, what are the pitfalls of reporting on these areas?
What would you repeat those three questions?
Well, the why I guess you can skip because it's happening.
First two.
The second is, what are the main question I have is, what are the main stories that people are focusing on that are coming out of the hyper-local focus?
What are the main stories coming out on that have hyper-local interest?
That's right.
Lady Gaga.
You want to take that?
Maybe.
Thanks.
I was saved.
I find that a lot of the focus is, I mean, well, we kind of have the ability, which some of our larger publications don't, which is to print a lot of those kind of calendar items, those you know, press releases from nonprofits, things of that nature. But in terms of the actual stories that we're going out and covering, I always find our largest, the most amount of feedback and hits on our websites are those local politics, land use, quality of life stories, particularly in Lower Westchester. I think almost everything, and I have these conversations with my reporters often, which is, you know, what's the impact on property taxes and stuff like that. Those are always the types of stories I think that that we're really focusing on. And again, I think that we have a slight inside track on that because we are so focused on the community that sometimes we don't need to just come in if there's a scandal with land use. We could talk about a rezoning issue and really give it that you know, microscopic view or that focus that maybe larger publications aren't able to. Was there another one? Something pitfalls? I mean, the pitfalls. I guess are there's just, obviously everybody's very possessive of their communities and things like that. And I think that there does run a little bit of a risk to say maybe someone doesn't get Mamaroneck or Larchmont or New Rochelle, that type of thing. And that's a real challenge for the reporters. But luckily we have a staff, I'm just patting us on the back, I guess, but that is out on the ground and is out there and really, getting to the bones of the issue.
Thanks, Mark. Ernie, and then George Latimer, and then I think what we'll do, because this meeting, so many people are interested in this subject, obviously. If the speakers can wait a little longer, we'll have informal questions for those of you who would like to remain after the formal meeting is ended, do so and come forward. We'll have a little salon up front here. Ernie?
I think a key element for our news dissemination is LMC-TV. A perfect example, on September 7th, the town had a town board meeting, and at that meeting we voted to go forward with rebound, something that affects virtually everyone who owns property in the town of America, which is most of the people here, I would venture to say. Now, they didn't televise it live. Now, not that reporters are preoccupied or can't make the town board meetings, but except for Paige, there was no representative of the press at the meeting. Normally, people who would be writing about what happens in Larchmont would watch it on LMC-TV, and they would see something that was interesting, they would follow it up with questions and calls, but we got virtually none of that. So it tells me that the fact that LMC wasn't there live broadcasting it because we were in one of the conference rooms and they can't broadcast live was a deficiency. So we need to recognize how important that is to communicate with the public. I'm sure we're going to have additional meetings and discussions. The contractor that we hired has promised, as part of the contract, like a dozen public sessions. So perhaps one at the summit will be forthcoming, and they'll explain and answer whatever questions people might have. But I just want to emphasize how important LMC-TV is to the community.
Judy Silverstein had mentioned to me long before this meeting was put together, that we ought to have a meeting of the originators of news, the school board, local governments, agencies, whatever, and ask them, are they putting out the news? Are they putting out the news so that our press and others can get it? So that's another time, Judy. George Latimer.
I'd like your take on a concern that I have and see how you guys process it. When we have detailed, complicated issues that we deal with in government, health insurance exchanges, hydrofracking, issues that relate to how we're going to handle long-term pension obligations, they require a certain depth and a certain amount of space in order to explain it in a way that a person would read it and understand it. And I know that the traditional electronic medium, radio and TV, doesn't have the time for that. The people who watch and listen to those mediums don't have the time and attention to that. You're all noting the trend that we're all noticing, which is we're getting information on BlackBerries and telephones and quick snippets, and it's almost like we're turning into just headline news. The headline, and I think Joe said very accurately, high on the list are police blotter. I assume obits score very high. You know, how do we, and I know this is cosmic, forget what I do for a living, how do we as citizens in a democracy get the content we need to make an intelligent decision when it requires 9 to 10 paragraphs and you're under pressure to do less quick 8 stories and all? Where do we go in the next 20 years if the trend line is where it's going, and yet there are complicated issues that require detailed dialogue before people can decide how to feel?
Can I take that?
Thanks. Good question. Wow.
It's a great question.
Wow.
One of the ways that we deal with that as hyper-local is in a case like that specific issue, healthcare. I'm not going to pretend to know everything. I'm going to write a paragraph about it, and then I'm going to link to 4 or 5 other sources so that people who want more depth can dive in from there. But I am not qualified to write the 20-paragraph article. Perhaps the writer at Time magazine is. So I'll write a little local lead and then link to the Time Magazine article. Because again, there's so many sources of news now in the world. Don't pretend to be the expert if there are other experts, but you can show who the experts are. And then that helps me because, sorry Carol, that helps us because then people come to us because they know they can get it all right there.
How do you sort out news from punditry? Something like that.
How do you sort out news from punditry?
Yeah. There's plenty of things that are written about healthcare which takes a point of view.
You know, I think that the readers are sophisticated enough to do that, and you can give all kinds of opinions and sources for people to go to and judge for themselves. I think you have to see every point of view before you can make an educated decision. So if I were to link the story that George wants, that George is involved with, and I write a paragraph that gives a local header to it, and then I link to Time, Newsweek, the New York Times, and then Rush Limbaugh, is that what you're saying? And then how do people not know it's punditry? It's a point of view, it's a point of view.
Well, that's on its face, but sometimes it's more disguised. You know, someone comes off as being not biased, but if you really read through what they're saying, they could be slanted.
Right.
And
Well,
that's where I think it's going to get hard for the average reader to be able to separate what's really informational and fact from what's postulated position that you know you may not, you know, and where is that level playing field where it's purely information, where it's purely objective.
I think our two other editors want to comment. I don't need a short.
I think the kind of deep linking that Polly's talking about, we as professionals, because our name on our website means something to all of you, so we have to be really careful about who we link to, and we have to exercise some professional discretion in that. And I think that's what she's talking about. To get to your question, what I would say is we have to do it in different layers. So there are some people who are going to read it on, you know, a BlackBerry or whatever. Basically on the BlackBerry, we're going to give them an introduction and offer them a way to go get more information in the print newspaper or on the website. A lot of times what we're doing now with a complicated issue, we'll run a couple of pages on something in print. We will put additional information on the website, for example. We'll reference a public document that we've used in our reporting, and then you can go to the website and get a PDF of the entire document that you can download and print out if you want to not even look at it through the lens of our reporting, but you want to read the whole thing yourself. So the reader has some opportunities to go get more information if they're so inclined.
Mark, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that what the Assemblyman brought up is, maybe this is the idealist in me speaking, but exactly why I think journalism is going to survive. You do need that kind of coverage, and I think that, you know, what you were saying earlier about how the Journal News has kind of started trying to trend towards these sunshine reports that you've been doing, those investigative pieces, those police blotter news stories, those DWIs, all those type of things. People want to read them, but they circulate that by the time that the print edition comes out, we already know that it happened. So I think those kind of pieces like hydrofracking, I think is a great example because it was off-putting, I think, for a lot of journalists just because of the fact they couldn't get their brain around it, frankly. So, but I think that that's the issue that is going to keep journalism going, because there is this kind of perception that anyone could be a journalist, and I guess that they can, in a sense, citizen journalism, but at the same time you do have those standards of research, quality, and all those type of things that I think that you're seeing that from us here to the daily newspapers to these national, international publications are really focusing on as the internet has been growing, which is, you know, getting those in-depth investigative pieces that maybe were once a little bit more common, but that's really going to be our bread and butter going forward as publications.
I think we'll stop the formal questions. How many would like to remain for a little while with our speakers to the degree they can remain. How many would like to stay? 2 and 2. Well, I think there are not enough names to have a full salon. So those who raise your hands, I'm sure, will be responded to by the questions individually, so you can post your questions. The meeting will be closed with Elaine's final benediction.
No, I just want to say that our next meeting, the third Tuesday of October, will be around the census, the data of the census and what it means to all of us locally. So I hope to see you next month at the next meeting. Yes, Joe?
I just want to say one thing. Jim with Habitat and Keith knows this. If anyone needs help with, anyone knows neighbors who still need help with gutting or sheetrocking or insulation, we have free insulation and free sheetrock that we're helping people with. Keith helped us on Howard Avenue, and a lot of you know we've done that. So we're still helping families in the area with the flood. I have my card, so I just want to make sure it's good to be here.
Can I add on to that? There are 3 entities that I believe that can really assist the help of Mamaroneck residents. Number 1, Jim with Habitat for Humanity. The Red Cross, if you know, set up a shelter at the high school. And I also think that the Furniture Share House, because they're providing a lot of help for the residents who have been inundated in the flooding. If you are a giving person, I say these 3 entities are wearing the badge real quick. Jim walks in and asks no questions. He just does. And the same thing with the Red Cross, no questions, and also the Furniture Share House. So if you're a giving resident, give to anything locally, I am United Way. But those 3 entities, if you could just give. I'm not a preacher, Rev, but give to those 3 entities because they have given.
Okay, I want to thank our panel for a very provocative and informative presentation.